Garen and a Dragon Named Goose, Chapter 9. Do not cower, boy. Stand tall. Darius growled the words as they turned onto the main road in Ashbridge. The sorcerer strode as if he owned all of Aria, the strong midday sun gleaming on his skin. These people, he gestured at a family peering from a nearby window. They all know about you already. Word travels fast, even for tight-lipped Aryans. And if they hadn't known, they did now. Darius's spirit wolf, Ebba, loped along to Garen's right, huge paws silent on the cobblestone, a smell like wet and musty earth. Along with Darius, in his fine military clothing, Garen was one giant spectacle. People stopped from their festival preparations, hanging lanterns or black and white bunting, to gawk and point. Kids followed a few paces behind, whispering and giggling. Each time Ebba glanced back, they froze. Garen could feel his cheeks burning as they neared the end of the houses, just before Sam's. By the main fountain, groups of men dressed in traditional Aryan dress of yellow and blue, with a bridge scrawled across the back, worked at cleaning and hanging adornments on the gilded festival wagon. From every open window came the sound of flute or drum, children practicing the songs of both Aria and Ashbridge. By the inn, barrels of river wine sat waiting to be cracked open, in workers wheeling them around out one by one. Sam's house was perhaps the smallest on the road and narrowest by far, wedged between the inn and the terrace. It was painted beach yellow across its 2 stories, each with only a single window and the bottom with a beech wood door. The roof was basic thatch, and worn at that. Birds' nests plugged the holes, but where the house lacked, it more than made up for in charm. Inside the picket fence gate, also a sandy shade of yellow, were the most beautiful flowers of the whole street. Oddly though, instead of leaning into the street where most of the light was to be had, the heads of the flowers were turned inwards towards the house. Garen tried to rush the last 10 paces before anyone else could notice him, but Darius put a heavy hand on his shoulder. Stop this cowardly scrambling. Garen felt his bag suddenly lighten. Hong! In Ebba's jaws, clutched by the nape of his neck, was Goose, wings and claws flapping uselessly. The men by the wagon turned to look. The kids gasped. It felt as if for one long second, the longest in his life, all of Aria had become completely still. Into the thick silence Darius strode, eyeing every one of them, his chest out, his clothes gleaming with a strange blue hue. When he spoke, it sounded like thunder. I am Darius Locke, sorcerer, elite of the South Vavian military. Let it be known that, from today, I am the protector of Garen's sky. He paused, his steel gaze sweeping over each and every one of them as if a pointed sword. If any harm is to come to this child, the jaws of my wolf and the steel of my sword will be waiting, Ebba growled, and even with Goose hanging from her mouth, the sound seemed to sweep around the square. Without waiting for a reply, Darius turned to Garen. You may go, Garen. I'll be near. Garen scrambled to Sam's door, seeing Sam's face disappear from the window above. Garen rasped the knocker twice. A few heartbeats passed, and Garen went to knock again, feeling the stairs of the town on his back. The door cracked open. Garen, by the mother, get in here, quick! Garen stepped through the narrow gap, and then paused, feeling the lightness at his back. He spun around to see Ebba, lowering her head to the door. Goose, still hanging from her jaws, dribble sliding down his scales. Garen grabbed Goose, and Sam slammed the door. Who in the underworld is that? Sam shouted, grabbing Garen by his shoulders, his eyes wide. As if we don't have enough problems already. Sam! That is no way to speak to a friend. Both the boys shot around to see Sam's mother coming down the narrow corridor towards them. It was so narrow Garen's dad would never be able to even walk sideways through. On her shoulder, by her long and straight black hair, sat her spirit animal, a grey nightingale. Ah, these are for you, Miss Villar. Garen took a bag of vegetables from his bag and gave them to her, as per his father's orders. His hands were still shaking. She took the bag, looking heavy for her very thin arms. Oh, thank you, sweetheart. Her voice was so soothing, each of her words accented by a soft sound from her bird. She didn't look at Goose even once, her soft brown eyes smiling at Garen. You boys go on upstairs. I won't keep you. Thanks, Miss Villar, Garen said, and after sliding off his sandals, quickly followed behind Sam, who was already disappearing up the narrow ladder like stairs. The whole second floor belonged to Sam, which sounded much more impressive than it actually was. Sam ran and dived into his small bed with a loud groan that turned into a scream directed at his pillow. Next to the bed was a small wooden desk piled with various books. Tom sat in the center of the room on a blue and frayed rug that covered the bare rafters, with Tortoise in his lap, Tanu pulling at the bird's feathers. The eagle was looking at Garen intently, while Tom just stared at the ceiling. On the other side of the room, past the white edges of the rug, was a tall wardrobe and a narrow window that sliced the room in a thin beam of light. "I got your note. Still seeing through Tortoise," Garen said, placing Goose down on the floor. Tom sighed, and Tortoise fell apart into his lap, like little golden marbles that rolled away to nothingness. He turned his actual head to look at Garen. "If I keep him in spirit form, I get back control. But once he's back, I can't stop it changing, and it comes and goes all the time." His fists were clenched as he stared into his lap. "Not good for the test," Garen said, not knowing what else to say. Tom just nodded. "Who the hell was that man and that wolf?" Sam said, sitting up on the end of his creaky bed. "Is that what the sound was?" Tom said, turning to Garen. Garen frowned, rubbing his temples, and took a seat on the chair at the desk. Trying to collect his thoughts, he took a deep breath. "It didn't help. His name is Darius Locke. He's been sent to watch over me from the military. Ebar, the wolf, is his spirit animal." "Does he know about the hot spring?" Sam said, his eyes wide. "No, and I don't think he cares really. He just wants to do his job and leave. At least, as far as I can tell." Sam fell back on the bed, seemingly relieved. Garen took a quick look out of the window. He could only pray Darius wasn't somehow listening in. So, he said, pointing to Tom and trying to change the subject, "How are we going to fix Tortoise?" "Fix Tortoise? You think that's bad," said Sam, shooting back up again, pointing at Tanu. "Every time I turn Tanu to spirit form, he comes back with something." Sam stood and stared at Tanu, who was sitting on the rug near Tom. Garen saw a small grin flash on Tom's face despite his sour mood. Sam took a deep breath and closed his eyes. Tanu lifted off the ground, swirling golden as if a wind had taken him and turned him to dust. As quickly as it had, the dust came back together and he was whole again. "Wow, Sam, you can use spirit form so easily. Oh, just kill me now, Garen," Sam cried, falling back onto the bed. Tom stifled a laugh. Garen took a closer look at Tanu and had to catch the laugh that erupted with his hand. Sam groaned. "He's literally got balls. Look at the size of them." And he did. Hanging between his legs from a tuft of fur were two round and furry balls so big that they were dragging along the floor. Tanu seemed happy enough as he shuffled around, patting them like drums. "That's got to be an instant fail." Sam furrowed his brow and stared intently at Tanu. Slowly, he shifted to spirit form and back. The balls were still there, although oddly shaped this time. "I think I'd rather fail," Sam moaned, slumping off the end of his bed. Tom shrugged at Garen. "It's been balls more often or not, but sometimes wings and things like that. Can't you do something?" Sam pleaded, rolling across the floor to face him. "Get Goose to puke on us again?" "There's got to be some way to fix this." The two boys stared intently at Garen and then at Goose, the dragon keeping a wary eye on Tortoise from between Garen's legs. "Guys, I don't know. I can't connect with him or even do spirit form yet." Sam and Tom looked at each other. "We're doomed. We're never going to pass the test," Tom said, Tortoise back in physical form on his lap, his head bobbing as he stroked it. Garen and a Dragon Named Goose, Chapter 9, Part 2. "The only way would be to keep Tortoise in spirit form the entire time," he sighed. "But I wouldn't even last halfway. My energy would run out." "And Sam," Tom said, pointing Tortoise to look at Sam, still laying on the floor. "It's an automatic fail if your spirit animal alters form during the 3 observed changes." "3, Garen said, squirming in his seat. He'd thought it was 2. Sam just groaned, his head in his hands. "Yes, 3, Tom replied, holding up 3 fingers in the wrong direction. "Father says they've changed the test more than usual for this year. Further spirit form changes might be needed for the obstacle course, but then it depends on the type of animal you have." Garen looked at Goose, who was sniffing around Sam's bed. Changing to spirit form was the second challenge. "I'll fail even the first challenge at this rate." The first challenge, Sam took his face out of his hands and looked at Garen as if he were a complete stranger. "No one fails the first challenge. All you have to do is sit still and in silence for a little while with your spirit animal next to you. Garen picked up Goose from the floor and sat him on his lap. The dragon cocked his head and looked at Garen for a moment before jumping off and chasing a ball of dust along the floor. Sam frowned. Okay, I see what you mean. Garen sighed. Arden tried to show me how to connect, but it's so hard. How did you guys do it? I felt it as soon as I named him Tortoise, Tom said. Garen sighed. Of course he did. Sam rubbed at his chin. It was a bit later for me, maybe a couple of days. Just happened. Garen nervously tugged at the edges of his cuffs. You didn't have to do anything. Both the boys just nodded. What did Arden tell you? Tom asked, Tortoise looking up at Garen. Just a technique that some people use to help connect to their spirit animal. Both the boys sat up straight. Just a technique, Sam smiled, rubbing his hands together. From Golden Boy himself. Let's hear it. But you guys have already connected. What's the for? Tortoise was suddenly right in Garen's face, held in Tom's hand. It might help deepen our connections, Garen, and fix whatever's happening to us. It's worth a try. Garen took a deep breath. Okay, but no promises. Tom and Sam sat before him, Tortoise and Tanu by their feet, and Garen began guiding them along the same way Arden had, albeit in a much less haughty tone. Tortoise was still from the get-go, the bird eventually shutting its eyes and breathing in time and Tom, but it took Tanu and Sam a while before the tanuki was completely still, his forever fidgeting hands eventually coming to a rest in his lap only just before his eyes closed. All the while, Goose circled around them, even sneaking close enough to Tortoise for a quick sniff. They looked serene, Sam and Tom like statues, and strangely, the boys had even started breathing together in time. Garen tried to join them, trying to see the river in his mind, but no matter how he tried, he just couldn't see it. All that came to mind was Darius, and the shocked looks on people's faces in the square. He peered outside again, as if he could feel eyes on him, crawling on his skin. Unsurprisingly, it was Tanu who broke focus first, falling backwards and rolling away from Sam, almost to the stairs steps. Tortoise then opened his eyes and spread his wings. Tom blinked, looking straight at Garen. I can still feel it, but he waved his hands in front of his eyes. I feel more in control. He sprung up on his feet. Garen, this is... He suddenly stopped, as if remembering he was meant to be the calm and collected one. This is great, he finished, a slight blush coming to his cheeks. Garen tried to smile through his anxiety, but probably looked more like he was grimacing. They both looked over to Sam as he got up, already trying to change Tanu back and forth from spirit form. The boys all peered closer as the gold wisps came into shape. You've got it this time, Sam, Tom said, his voice full of renewed confidence. Garen nodded. Think of the river, Sam, he said, his voice sounding far too much like Arden for his own comfort. But even within the wisps not yet fully formed, two suspicious-looking circular shapes were showing through. Sure enough, when the little tanuki formed, a very large grin was not all he had. Sam's head almost fell off. Guys, I think it's over for me. Garen was struggling to find a positive angle for his friend, as if it might make him feel less guilty for having caused it. Maybe he's just meant to have them now, Sam, he said, gesturing toward Tanu. He sure seems to love them. Tanu was walking around, beating them with his hands in time to the distant beat of festival drums. In fact, Tom said, holding up his hand, why don't you try and make him come back with them? As long as he stays the same, you won't fail. Sam was hitting his head with his hands and then sighed, I'm going to die with embarrassment, but I think you're right, Tom. He looked at his spirit animal. You like him, Tanu? Tanu nodded and gave a thumbs up. A scream came from the stairs and the three boys turned to see Maya, her hand over her mouth. She looked to the boys and then back to Tanu, who still had one hand on his balls and the other thumbs up. Garen grabbed Goose as he tried to dart for her. Why? She managed to breathe between her fingers, her nails painted blue. Does Tanu have those? None of the boys answered. Maya shook her head. I don't want to know. Do I? All the boys nodded. Maya took a moment to compose herself, smoothing down imaginary lines in her apron and fiddling at her ponytail. She then looked at them again, trying very much to keep Tanu out of her view. Sam noticed and put a pillow in front of the animal. I just came to tell your mother about the vacancy at the inn for a singer, she said, stepping properly into the room. She said, you guys are up here. A singer? Mom hasn't sung in ages. I'm not sure she's ready. She's already accepted, Sam. Maya cut Sam off and flashed a smile. Really helps us out as, she paused to glare at Garen, our usual singer can't get into aria anymore. She then thrust out a piece of scrunched yellow paper to him. These are everywhere, and everyone knows it's you, Garen. The whole square is buzzing with talk about it, even among the outsiders. So much for the council keeping things under wraps. Garen unfolded the paper. The dragon, spirit, animal, and aria. Who's the mystery boy? Council conspiracy. It only got worse after that. Sam snatched it out of his hand. Well, it was going to happen sooner rather than later, he said, taking a look and then passing the paper to Tom. Maybe it's better to come out now. Garen just nodded, but he felt like the narrow room was becoming smaller and his chest tighter. His hand shook as Tom passed the flyer back to him. Not as bad as Tanya's balls, right? Tom said, laughing, but earning a stern look from Sam. Garen picked up Goose in his bag, feeling a knot in his chest. I'm going to go, guys, he said, stumbling past Maya. I'll see you later. Garen managed to make it halfway back down the Ashbridge Road, the flyer still gripped in his hands, before Eva caught up with it. She nuzzled against his head, a soft whine coming from her throat as she leaned into him, slowing his frantic pace. It wasn't until she licked his cheek that Garen realized he was crying. An arm came round from the other side, helping him to stand. It is okay to cry, boy. Cry now and be done with it. Later, there will not be a chance.